Oh, I like your name this week. Flibberty Gibbet. Flibberty Gibbet.
Flibberty Gibbet.
And I want you to know that I can say Tralfamador now. Tralfamadorians, even.
Yeah, good job, man. You've been practicing?
Thankfully, it only happens once in this story, in this chapter.
It's the last word in the chapter. Welcome back to Sci-Fi and Fantasy Read Along. How are you guys doing?
They're pretty good.
Yeah?
Fine.
I want to find those that thing I was looking for, or I was telling you about
The double thing? The thing you've
the
noticed
double
it's
thing.
happened
Look, I
twice
know
now?
it in my head, but I would like to see it. It's not that important.
He said the phrase, so it goes.
That's like 15 times in this book, 150 times or something.
Yeah, I lost count, to be honest. I mean, I think I get it, why he says it all the time, but it's...
You were counting at one point?
I was counting at one point, and every time he said it, I was counting. And then,
someone's already done it for you, you know.
Put a little tick in a box. What does it tell you? Yeah, I mean, you gave up, so obviously it wasn't telling you much, right?
Well, no. I think it's just when you're constantly assaulted with unpleasant circumstances or death and misery and all these other things. Death, typically, you're like, so it goes. You just have to you have to get a hard, thick skin over it, and that's your response when somebody dies. You don't feel misery or sympathy because you can't. Otherwise, you will sink into, depression and misery. So you just say, so it goes, and you move on.
Is it only when somebody dies that he says so it goes?
I don't think so, but overwhelmingly, yes. I would say that's probably true.
Yeah, I think so.
Basically, anytime something bad happens, usually to somebody else, you're just thankful it's not happening to you. So you say, so it goes. Let's call it gallows humor, if that is even an appropriate label.
If every bad thing happens, like his father dies when he's in boot camp, basically.
So it goes.
So it goes.
Yes.
His wife dies when he's not around, I think, or
he was convalescing in the Vermont hospital.
Right. And he's not there for that.
You hit the phrase that I was actually looking for. It's a coping mechanism.
Well, I mean, we said in the first in the first chapter we were talking about,
and the second one.
They didn't say PTSD back then, I don't think, but we do now.
I don't even think this is PTSD. I just think it's a way to harden your mind and your emotions against.
Well, maybe not that part of it.
But we get into it, which I won't now. But we get into to me, it's like clear he has PTSD in several parts of this chapter.
Are you talking about seeing the halos?
I don't know what that means, by the way.
Well, did you guys have to look anything up in this chapter?
Yeah, I did. When Roland Weary gets spit on, there's a phraseology and some terminology that I don't know.
Essentially, the best way to describe it is it's a loogie.
It was fourragère.
Oh yeah, and that's like how there's like epaulets on uniforms and stuff, and
yeah.
It seems like it's the string or the rope part.
It's the braided cord.
Yeah.
On the uniform.
And it's like this loogie, and he says it has blood sausage and I can't. I'm going from memory here. It's blood sausage and schnapps and tobacco, and it's just this. The braided cord just hanging from his shoulder. I'm like, that's very descriptive.
It was an award.
There's a couple other things, but I didn't actually end up looking them up. But it would have been whether or not something was actually real or not.
Well, it's pretty trivial. But I looked up. He said when he basically time slipped into his future self, he had these bumper stickers on his car.
Oh, yeah. I looked those up as well.
Yeah, visit Oswald Chasm. And I'm like, wow. I looked it up, and I'm like, that place sounds cool. And I was really bummed because I was in Lake Placid just a couple of years ago, and that's only less than an hour away. So I could have gone, and I'm a geologist, and you just look at the pictures of that thing, and you're like, wow, it's pretty.
It's something to look forward to.
Yeah, exactly. And I looked up Earl Warren because I was like, I had heard the name, but I didn't know much about this guy. And
he was a Republican in his day, but does he not sound an awful like a liberal now?
Well, he was kind of they called it the Warren Court because he was kind of like the
Chief Justice. He was the 14th Chief Justice,
and he kind of
before that. At this point in time in the novel, he's the It depends on where you are. If you're Billy Pilgrim back in the war, I think he's the governor of California, and after that, he's in the Supreme Court by then.
Yeah, but this guy was actually instrumental, like one of the power brokers for like pushing the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, and then he went to the East Coast where he's like, oh well, segregation is horrible and morally wrong. So I don't know. He sounds like
he has a complicated legacy.
Let's call it that. Yes, let's call it that. Yeah.
Now,
Right.
They also mentioned the John Birch Society, right?
The ultra-conservatives of their time.
Yeah. Which is interesting, but I don't care. Personally. I don't know if it matters.
Well, we'll talk about the bumper stickers when we get to that section, if you guys don't mind. I had to look that stuff up as well, but I think it behooves us to look that stuff up because it gives us an insight, one, into Vonnegut, and two, into the character that he's creating.
Right, sure. I agree.
Is there anything else you ought to look up or decided to in your own best interest or whatnot?
Well, there's all the obstetrician stuff I didn't bother to look up. Did you guys?
No. I mean, I knew what he was talking about when he was mentioning the owl.
Oh, well, no. I meant like...
It looks like an owl. And then that's the stuff about Europe?
No, yeah, when he's reading the article, the review of optometry.
Yeah, no, I didn't look any of that up because I think I knew what he was doing with it right then and there.
Oh,
so
what do you think he was doing?
We'll talk about it in the time, yes?
Oh, okay. Well, how do you say that?
I didn't know we were doing that anymore.
How do we even do that? Because he flips back and forth.
This one is extremely linear in a like we can follow this one through paragraph by paragraph without any problem. We just jump when he jumps. There's no reason not to, right? We'll talk about it. Every paragraph essentially gets a little bit of attention, or we skip it, and we just move on to the next one. And if he jumps, we jump, and if he jumps back, we jump back.
All right.
It's easy.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to Sci-Fi and Fantasy Read Along. I am ATN, and today, as usual, I am joined by two of my very good friends. Yule, please say hi.
Hey, everybody.
And DM Phil, would you please say hi?
Gigamags.
Welcome, you guys, and welcome to our listeners. We're here to talk about Chapter 3 of Slaughterhouse 5 today. If you're ready, we will begin. You think this book is dark?
Well, I mean, even though the scenes of the war are kind of light, even though he's getting his ass kicked or people are getting shot and they're going to get, caught and people are going to die, it's kind of funny. It's explained to us mirthfully, I guess. Or maybe because he's going, the way he travels through time when he's telling the story, maybe that gives a sort of, I don't know, it's just lighter in a way. It's taking a very dark subject and it becoming a lot lighter in a way.
I don't think it's lighter, Yule. I think that he just has this ambivalence towards death.
Well, that maybe, yeah.
And then when it's appropriate, or the only possible way you could find humor is to laugh at death, and he often does.
Yeah, like when Etienne said, he was going to get killed by Roland. He's just laughing about it.
That's a good opportunity to catch everybody up on where we ended our last episode, which was in the severe beating that Billy Pilgrim was getting from his ally, Roland Weary, when they were come upon by 5 Germans and a German shepherd.
Yeah.
Captured. And I guess they'd just been ditched as well by the 2 scouts.
Yeah, the 2 scouts, and we're going to find out about them in a sec, too.
The dog. Tell me about that dog.
In what way do you mean? I mean, it was shivering.
The dog's name is Princess. The dog's tail is between its legs. It's not an attack dog. It's a farm dog that the Germans borrowed from a farmer. It doesn't know what the game is. Like, the owner's not even around. Like, it's a loner. But, I have these stereotypes in my mind that I've seen in films and stuff where, you've got your German officers and they're really sleek uniforms and they're very hard-nosed and they have the German dogs, right? Walk the dogs around on a short leash and it's really vicious. But these guys don't seem vicious at all. They seem like they haven't been demonized by an enemy. They seem like people. They seem like they could be your neighbors.
Isn't that the thing about war? I mean, when you start conscripting people, they don't necessarily buy into the ideology other than the fact that they live there and they have to do what they're supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
If it's a just war and you have a homicidal maniac on your side, they're doing things for their own sick pleasures, right? But it's for good. And if you're just this Joe Schmo and you're conscripted to the most evil army of all time, you're a vile piece, you know?
There was compassion portrayed in this scene that I found almost like reinvigorating. For instance,
they helped him get up.
Not only helped him, but then brushed the snow off him.
Yeah.
And then they searched him for weapons, sure. But even Billy Pilgrim looked on this young boy with compassion for the horrible equipment that he had, and said he had this, angelic face. And so basically he saw another human being, not just the enemy, not just a person, but somebody who was actually helping him out, maybe saving his life. Now, of course, it went downhill after that, but in that point in time, when he
not for him.
Well, when he needed a human being, I mean, he found the best human being in the enemy, not in his fellow soldier, Weary.
Weary's a piece of S. As we have, there's not a lot of Weary in this chapter, which is fine, but what little we do have is still pretty funny.
The soldier, the German soldier, had bad boots or something like that?
The one that you're talking about is a 15-year-old kid that he said was as beautiful as Eve, of Adam and Eve's fame.
Calls him an androgyne, right?
Yes, he did. There was another boy about the same age, and then there were two old toothless men, and then they had a captain who was kind of leathery and ropey, and he said he was a good soldier.
He was a corporal.
Ah, corporal.
Well, and they said, and the narrator says that this is a mop-up job.
The Germans and the dog were engaged in a military operation which had an amusingly self-explanatory name. A human enterprise which is seldom described in detail, whose name alone, when reported as news or history, gives many war enthusiasts a sort of post-coital satisfaction. It is, in the imagination of combat's fans, the divinely listless love play that follows the orgasm of victory. It is called mopping up. I think when you're mopping up, you're so thankful that there's very little chance of the enemy shooting back and you have the upper hand. So you're like, oh my God, thankfully we won. All we have to do is go round up the wounded, round up random people everywhere. People are probably willing to surrender, and it's a very low-risk job. And I think that's what he's really trying to explain here, is that in this particular circumstance, the Germans had won the day, and everybody they found was likely going to surrender, except the two scouts who apparently wanted to ambush the Germans, and that didn't work out because they were hopelessly surrounded.
Okay, so now you're saying that it's people being thankful they're still alive, and even though they have a gruesome task ahead of them, it isn't so bad as the alternative. What I was thinking was, think of road rage, or how cops pull people over and then beat them up. It's kind of like when he was talking about it being orgasmic, I was thinking that sudden surge of still the victory, but the act that was going on is this just big bloody mess of boom. And then there's the mopping up afterwards.
Well, that certainly may be true, and I'm not going to disregard that. I think a lot of people may have that opportunity to just throw their vengeance and anger and frustration into a beaten enemy. But Billy Pilgrim's experience was the opposite. He got captured, yes, but it was by human beings, and they treated him like a human being. And I that's something that probably escapes the history books, that type of compassion, and which he experienced. But still, he's still an enemy, and the future is still not going to be pleasant. But I mean, what can you do? I mean, you woke up on the wrong side of the battle line, and you got captured.
Last chapter, he was also really, really dazed, if you guys remember.
Well, he was also, doing his little time jump thing, and one of the things he was doing was searching for that steering wheel right at that moment.
Yeah, when he was drunk, yeah.
Yeah, and he was drunk, and then he comes back and he's disoriented. I think if that's the right time, still searching for that steering wheel.
He got a beating then, and that's where we picked him up. And he is, like you said, Philip, he's being helped up, dusted off with the snow, searched for weapons by human beings. Would you guys entertain the notion that this is a religious experience for him?
If you want to go to the St. Elmo's Fire description,
I don't think we need to go there yet, but I think it's related.
I had not made that connection, but I completely forgot that he came from a religious background, and he came here to be a deacon's assistant. Sorry, Chaplin.
I bring it up because he saw Adam and Eve when he looked into those golden boots.
Oh, yeah.
And then when he looked at the boy, he thought the boy was an angel. I mean, there are other things throughout the chapter, but those two definitely started here, right?
I didn't make any of those connections, but I see why you did. Okay. All right. We'll explore that.
Oh, yeah, there's a bit more to go, too. Yeah, for sure.
Right. So they get captured, these two, Weary and... Weary is stripped of all of his goodies. Oh, yeah, there's the bulletproof Bible. That was another thing.
That was another one, yeah.
They took away his trench knife. We get to hear the German corporal speaking in German, and we get to understand it, even though Billy Pilgrim and Roland Weary don't.
Can we go back to the first chapter just for a second? He has that real long German phrase, right?
Yeah, that he didn't bother to translate from the book on Dresden.
But here we're getting the translation. Is it because it's the book?
This is the omniscient narrator telling us what's going on,
all right,
not the author, right?
Not Kurt Vonnegut.
Not Kurt Vonnegut. I think he has stepped away from his actual role as human being, and he's put on the pants of author at this point.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I just wanted to remember that. That's all.
So yeah, he comments about the trench knife, and he's like, "Oh, I bet you'd love to, rip our faces off with this and stab us in the neck or stomach or something."
Yeah, if this was like a horror movie, Roland Weary would be stabbed up.
He made a nice comment about that pornographic picture, and then he gave all of his stuff, including Roland's shoes, he gave them to that 15-year-old angelic androgyne.
I thought he disseminated the equipment.
Okay, he disseminated the equipment. And they gave Weary those crappy shoes and then put him on the march.
He didn't have to give him those crappy shoes, but that's what I'm, going back to. Like, hey,
barefoot in the snow.
Your shoes are better than mine, so sorry, I'm taking yours, but you can have mine because something's better than nothing.
So we were talking about the scouts that deserted Roland and Billy.
Ditched them,
and now they're lying in ambush for the Germans, right?
Yeah, that was the intent.
Right, and then they got discovered and shot behind, and this is what he writes. Now they are dying in the snow, feeling nothing, turning the snow to the color of raspberry sherbet. So it goes. And then it says, so Roland Weary was the last of the Three Musketeers.
Uh-huh.
Is there another candy bar reference later on in this book?
You're right. It was the journalist that was pumping the author for information about the guy that had died in the car in the elevator. You remember that?
Oh, I think in this chapter too, but yeah, over then, that's right.
She was eating at Three Musketeers.
Huh, interesting. Okay, cool. There's just something spur
That's
moment.
Good eye. That's a good eye.
Well, so I still have this let's call it a supposition. I'm not claiming anything right now, but I still has this kind of this theory, hypothesis that the scouts were them, right? Were those two guys.
And now they're dead. That's fine. I hear what you're saying. I don't know. I will just wait and see, yes?
I didn't get it. I mean, how would he know they had died?
He heard the shots. Bang, bang, bang.
Oh, okay.
And remember, we have an omniscient narrator that can tell us everything.
Oh, it's a little bit confusing, but...
It's not Billy Pilgrim, man. We're not getting the inside of Billy Pilgrim's head unless the author tells us what's inside Billy Pilgrim's head. We're getting the narrator who is omniscient, telling us whatever he wants to reveal. And only what he wants to reveal.
This book is deceptively simplistic in language, and it is complex in my ability to comprehend. Comprehend?
That's the word, comprehend. Let's write that one down right now.
If you say it enough, it'll get in the dictionary.
Tralfamador.
All right, so they march Billy Pilgrim and Roland Weary to a house.
Weary gets the clogs, by the way. The kid's
He does.
Clogs.
He gets the hinged clogs. They march him to a house where there are other Americans that have been captured and taken prisoner. There's a rabbi who's been shot through the hand, and Billy Pilgrim takes a nap on his shoulder. So there's another thing. You got a Jewish man who has, half of the stigmata.
Oh, I didn't get that. Oh, wow.
Maybe it's just happenstance, right?
It's possible. Yeah, it's really hard to say. Remember the aliens, they also have an eye inside their hand?
Oh, that's true. I think that's better. Interesting.
Did you guys know, it makes sense, right, that there's cliff notes for this novel?
I'm sure there is.
There are.
I'm just saying that I have this nagging, uncomfortable feeling that this novel has so many deeper meanings than I'm capable of picking up on the first read.
So read it twice.
Phil, I think you're doing fine. He's just looking for glad hands. He's glad handing right now.
What do you call that? Fishing for
compliments.
Fishing for compliments.
No, I'm actually setting myself up for not being hung after.
Oh, by scholars all over the world listening to this. Please forgive us.
All right, so in this case, Billy puts his head on the shoulder of that man who's been shot through the hand, the rabbi,
And then boom.
who is also a chaplain, and that triggers him jumping in time.
Yeah, he's at his optometrist's office with a patient.
All right, so the optometrist's office in 1967, but he doesn't know that. He doesn't know what year it is. He doesn't know how old he is. He just knows that he's back in his optometrist's office, and he had fallen asleep while giving an examination to some poor woman.
Now, this is where the owl is hanging upside down that you were talking about?
Yeah, it's the optometer. It's that device they use to measure people's eyes. They put it in front of your face and tell you to look at stuff.
I never thought of that as an owl. I've used it it's been on me a bunch of times, let's just say that.
You see it, though. Now that he's described it as an owl, you're like, oh, yeah, perfect.
That's nice when you can see something. Like, there's a lot of people, they're never going to go to the optometrist.
Yeah, sure.
They're going to get lucky and just use reading glasses from half-price books or something.
Walgreens or something.
Yeah, exactly. But for those of us that are out there that have had to use them ever since our teenage years, it's funny that, you see it all the time, and then it's described to you that way, and it still doesn't... I didn't get it. No, not until you said right now. That's good. Cool.
Okay.
I was a little bit confused on the sleeping part, because it seems like between this section and another section, where when he falls asleep, proverbially, that's when he's phasing in and out of time.
That's one of the things, yeah.
And he went to a doctor about it, something...
Well, he was crying.
Yeah.
That's why he went to the doctor, is because he would just break out crying. So, maybe he does have PTSD, right?
Oh, for sure.
But then again, the next time he jumps, he's in that really windy, cold environment, and it's causing his eyes to sting and weep. And so maybe it's because of where he's jumping to, or in some place in his life, he's crying because of something else.
Oh, I just think that's like when somebody who's crying says, "Oh, there's something in my eye."
All right, so how does he determine what year it is?
It was because of the bumper stickers on the car, right?
The license plate.
That's right. He's describing the back end of a car.
His car.
It was his car.
Yeah, with his bumper stickers.
It's a Cadillac Eldorado Coupe de Ville.
Pretty fancy.
I think that was quite a fancy car back in the day.
Yeah, I think so. So, what are the bumper stickers? You mentioned it earlier, Philip. You looked up the bumper stickers that he had.
I did, because I latch on to stuff like that. But one of them was visit Ausable Chasm.
That's the only bumper sticker that he put on himself, for himself. The other two were given to him by his father-in-law, and I guess he put them on his car so as to avoid a conflict with him. I don't really know.
Well, I mean, his whole business and being a rich dude the way he is because partially his father-in-law, right?
Yeah, he helped set up the business for him. But
and
the impeach Earl Warren, that had to have been from when he was the governor, because you can't impeach a justice.
You can impeach any public official.
And not a justice.
Are you sure?
That job's for life.
I know, but I think there is impeachable possibilities.
Let's look that up, actually, because I didn't know that was a thing.
Well, I mean, I saw someone talking about it.
They can be impeached.
They can't. Okay, very good.
Yeah, shall hold their offices during good behavior. That's never going to happen. Samuel Chase was impeached.
How long ago was that?
1805.
Oh my gosh. I mean...
Yeah. Okay, so maybe it is from that time period. That does make more sense.
These people are so cloistered. That's politics. Never mind. You forget that.
Okay, so this section of the chapter, it seemed really banal to me. Like, he was bored with his life. That's kind of the impression I get when we're talking about his life in the 60s. He's wealthy, yeah, but he looks out onto the parking lot, and it's just hundreds of cars in a shopping center, and he just kind of doesn't seem to have any excitement or care. And we just got out of a chapter, or a portion of the chapter, where he was having like a religious experience during the war, right?
He ends this part with saying, "Where have all the years gone?" That's how life is a lot of times. You know, a whole decade goes by. What did I do? Nothing. But all these things happened. That's life.
I think there was one line he said in there when he was reading the
journal,
the review of Optometry. He ended it with saying, "Billy Pilgrim tried hard to care."
What do you think that means?
It's like you don't care about anything in life.
Well, he was specifically referring to the journal and the hubbub that was being reported on in the journal.
I think there's more to it than that. I think there's a symptom of something greater, and the greater symptom is you're just going through the mechanics of life with no plan for the future. I mean, you're plotting, and that's what he was doing. He was reading it because he was an optometrist, and there was other things going on in his life that he was dealing with. But
dude, he's reading an article about where they're going to be in 50 years. You might as well be reading about the people that make boxes. You know, I mean,
with boxes.
It's like Milhouse's dad at the saltine or at the cracker company.
Well, so it was right after that when he said Billy Pilgrim tried hard to care about that article, but he really didn't. And the siren went off for noon, right? Just like it did in our hometown. And you know, it's funny because like I grew up with that for all intents and purposes, like every single day, and every single time it went off, it kind of like jolted me a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's supposed to a little, I think.
Well, and it did for him, except he's like, oh my God, World War III. And so I've started documenting every time that kind of happens, that an event in, let's call it modern time, like post-World War time, he instantly thinks World War II. Right, his experiences
War
there.
III.
Well, he said World War III,
well,
but let's be honest. He's talking about World War II.
But hold on. Back in this time, if I'm not mistaken, they were making like bomb shelters and stuff like that because they were worried about World War III, correct?
Cold War. And we were in Vietnam at this point in time.
Most of my knowledge of anything is either reading a book or a comic book or television. And there was a Happy Days episode where they were building a bomb shelter. And of course, you know, the comedy aspect is everybody wants to get in if something were to happen. But it's like, well, this is something people were thinking about at one time. I mean, not where I was in the 70s, but...
What do you think it says about Billy Pilgrim that he put those bumper stickers on his bumper? Do you think that means anything? Does it mean anything to you?
The thing I remember hearing about the John Birch Society is that they were pretty...
They're ultra conservative.
Yeah, I don't know. I hazard to get into this conversation because I only know things that I've heard in passing and I've never looked into it.
Well, what do you think it says about Billy Pilgrim? I mean, it doesn't matter your political leanings or mine or listeners. That none of that matters.
He doesn't seem like he's a guy that's like really raw into anything necessarily. So
yeah, sure.
He probably, like you said, he's doing it to get along. In fact, almost everything he does seems to be that way. You know, even when he's getting into the on his routine, his drills, you know, and he's playing the organ, everything just seems to be like he's just kind of passing through time.
Huh, that's interesting.
I mean, if have to come up with something right this second.
Okay, that's good. Philip, do you want to add anything to that or not?
That's actually pretty good. He's like
passing the time.
Yeah, he's floating through life without taking a stand on anything important.
And we'll see a little more of that really, really soon. But that siren, the fire department siren that strikes noon every day and they test their siren, which is what's going on, that triggers him to travel in time.
That's when he wakes up on the wounded rabbi's shoulder, right?
Yeah, and there's a German kicking his feet and letting him know that it's time to move on.
So he wakes up and they say, "Get up." And
they weren't mean about it.
No,
they just
all
kicked
right.
his feet. They just kicked his feet. The Germans are not portrayed as the enemy here. They're just portrayed as people.
Yeah. Kick his feet. Come on, let's go. And they march him into their camp. And the photographer's there, and he missed the shot, or it was like, hey, better yet, why don't you guys go back and bring him back in so I can get some shots of this?
He wanted an actual capture.
So he put him in behind the bushes. Hilarious. Yeah, and they had their machine guns on him all during that time. And I was like, This would be a perfect time to be set up by the Germans if they were going to just like do him in, you know? Look, this guy escaped. Bang, bang, bang. Good picture, too.
So he has this funny look on his face because he's straddling 2 time periods. And Vonnegut describes it as like his smile was like the Mona Lisa's, but stranger than the Mona Lisa's smile. And he had a good reason to have that smile. And then I think he's back in his car and he's driving on again. That fancy Cadillac. He's going to the Lions Club luncheon. Yes?
Yeah, and he says, it's like you said, he has a foot in both times at this, you know, both at the same time. So he's back in the war and he's over here in 67.
Right. So this is the part that Philip said was uncomfortable for him, where he's driving through what is referred to by the author as a black ghetto, which had recently been basically burned to the ground during some rioting.
Yeah, he compares it to Dresden.
He does. He's driving through Ilium, and he doesn't think the first part looks like Dresden. He ends up at a stoplight, and a gentleman's knocking on his window, and I don't know that he even looked at the guy. The light turns green, and he just drives on.
Well, he definitely looked at him because he described him as black, and that may be a superfluous
peripheral vision.
The author described him as black. Billy doesn't even say that he looked at him or anything like that.
But let's be honest. I mean, if anybody comes up to your car when you're stopped at a stoplight and taps on the window, I mean, you're not
knocking my door.
Yeah, it doesn't matter who it is.
I don't care. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it depends. I mean, you know what? If Freddy or Jason is right behind you, I'm locking my door.
Yes.
That's not going to
help. And I'm probably not waiting for the green light either.
I mean,
no.
Maybe the only person I would open the window for is either The Rock or Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, really?
Men. Both men. You'd be like, get in my car. Get in my car, men. That's
fine.
Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Yes, Dwayne The Rock Johnson. All right, fine. I'll throw in somebody else. Dolly Parton, because she seems like the nicest woman that we've had. Practically like the Mona Lisa these days.
All right, so he drives on, and then he goes through part of the town that has been even more devastated somehow, and this is the part that he thinks looks like Dresden.
Right.
And this is where they're going to be putting in the new arts center and the new government buildings and etc.
Yeah, urban renewal.
Urban renewal, and that was just fine with Billy Pilgrim.
Right.
Yeah, but the way he describes it was also he's ambivalent.
Well, he's not enthusiastic about it.
Okay, yeah, that's a better.
But it's okay. It's okay with him. He's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
He's just going along with it, kind of, right? It's all right with him.
You know, just to reemphasize, I mean, he's connecting his modern day experiences with things he experienced in the war, and
he's experiencing in the war, if you were to believe what he's saying. If I was somehow living 2 time periods of my life at the same time, it would be real hard to focus on any one thing. Just getting through is probably quite an achievement, I think.
So you think that while he's an older gentleman that he's actually seeing the past happen at the same time?
I have no idea. Sure, maybe.
I feel like he's jumping in time. I don't feel like he's got them overlaid.
Well, I don't know. He described it as having feet in 2 times.
Well, I don't
know.
Let's call it more like a seesaw, right? You know.
Sure, maybe. Did you ever see 12 Monkeys when Bruce Willis would come back in time, and he'd be like a babbling idiot for a while? You know, they put him in an asylum, and he's like drooling and everything because he's trying to like catch up. You know.
Yeah.
And bouncing more than once is probably really difficult.
Yeah, I like that movie.
That might be a really good analogy. I was thinking the same thing. If you're like 30% in one time and 20% another time and 10% and who knows where, I think it makes it complicated for you to figure things out.
So let's say on just 2 passes, back and forth, okay? Back and forth, one time it's 90-10, and then another time it's like 30-70 maybe. That would be really screwy too.
You mean the amount of time that he's spending there?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Well, not even that. But let's talk about, you know, theoretically, like how where your consciousness is laid. Is it 30% in the past and 70% now? And I think that's kind of what he's trying to portray there. Is that there's a part of his brain that is in the past, and there's a part of the brain that is in the present, and it's not 100% either way. There's always overlap. Or not overlap, but it's the seesaw.
Don't you think that you could make the explanation for him thinking of Dresden because he's been in a bombed out city and this looks like a bombed out city, and it doesn't matter if he's jumping back and forth through time?
That's the other thing. Maybe he is not actually bouncing through time. He's in the present day and he's consistently reliving,
Well, it doesn't cause him to jump into the past again. It's just something that he thinks about, that it looks like the bombed out city that is Dresden,
sure.
And that it is the prelude to urban renewal.
Mm-hmm.
And then he ends up at the Lions Club luncheon. That's where he meets the major who's defending the war in Vietnam. And again, Billy Pilgrim he's not particularly sold on the idea, but he doesn't find any reason to get worked up by it.
Oh, even though he's saying that we should bomb Vietnam to the Stone Age.
What was his reason?
So when he's talking about the communists, he's saying they could not force their way of life on weak countries.
They shouldn't. And that's why they were bombing them.
But that's what we want to do to North Vietnam, right?
Yeah, that's also what urban renewal is.
Oh, I didn't get that.
Urban renewal is when you displace poor people, essentially.
Well, these days we call it, what do we call it?
Gentrification.
Well, we try and put a nicer face on it. I mean, I don't necessarily subscribe to it, but they're trying to beautify. It doesn't take into consideration the people that are there. Or if it does, it's how can we get them out of here, like you said.
I think largely it's they don't care about the poor people. They do what they want to do because money is king in our country. In a communist country, the party is king, and they don't care. But I think all of these things are related. I think this is Kurt Vonnegut showing his political mettle. He's casting a judgment on urban renewal and gentrification and comparing it to the behavior of our military and the communist military in the Vietnam War.
If that's true, it's very subtle, and I didn't pick it up.
If it was heavy-handed, you would be upset that it was heavy-handed.
Sure.
Yeah, you're probably right.
But now he's drawing a direct correlation between capitalism and communism. It's pretty much,
they're two sides of the same coin,
exactly.
Right? They're both governments that want stuff, and they don't really care about the people that.
I love on my social media, I'll see people that'll hate commies or liberals, right? And then the others will hate the conservatives and whatnot. And it's like, I don't know. Sometimes I'm just like eating popcorn,
just watching the show.
I think I got past it finally. With age, sometimes. I know I can get caught up in things, there's some stuff that's definitely outrageous, but overall I'd rather play devil's advocate or see the other side before I pay attention to what's being force-fed to me. And I kind of feel he's the same way also, a bit, except he goes along with it.
You're a Gen Xer, right?
Oh, yeah.
So our generation has been characterized as politically apathetic.
I believed in the don't vote, it only encourages them point of view. That's not an original joke, but I believe it.
Philip, for Christmas or birthday or something, gave me a bumper sticker that said, Cthulhu for president, why vote for a lesser evil?
Yeah, Cthulhu's always a go-to candidate, if you ask me.
So we end this particular section with Billy kind of serene.
They talk about a framed prayer that he has on his office wall.
Yes.
And you're talking about religion earlier. This is a very religious thing. Funny enough, it's also one of the, I guess it's the slogan for AA, if I'm not mistaken.
I didn't know about that.
Oh, it is.
Are you talking about the game Axis and Allies?
No, I'm not. Alcoholics Anonymous, they have the God grant me the serenity to accept things that cannot change, and the courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to always to tell the difference.
So now are you starting to get the impression that Billy Pilgrim has the serenity that's necessary because he understands that he can't change anything?
What does the word pilgrim mean?
I mean, why don't you look it up?
I'm doing it right now.
Okay, so look it up and then tell us what it means.
Pilgrim, a person who journeys to a sacred place for religious reasons. But to pilgrim, this is a verb, which means an action. The archaic version means to pilgrim is travel or wander like a pilgrim, which is kind of
so
the same
like
thing.
A pilgrimage. There was like the Jews did it back in the Old Testament and stuff, right?
You're supposed to do it for Mecca if you're a Muslim. Once in your lifetime, you're supposed to go to Mecca.
There you go. Oh, people visit that the Salt River.
It's still commonplace. I mean, people do pilgrimages all the time.
I would assume hippies go to Stonehenge.
Or Woodstock. They'd probably go to Woodstock, right?
Definitely Woodstock was a pilgrimage.
Not anymore. Now they go to Burning Man.
Going back to the Serenity thing. That was a thing that he was unenthusiastic about, if I'm not mistaken.
He was unenthusiastic about the bombing of Vietnam.
But a lot of patients who saw the prayer on the wall told him it helped them to keep going. I don't think it helped him necessarily. I don't think he's finding solace in this, or he's found it necessarily.
I don't think it's solace. I think that this just goes a little ways to explain his character. The author told us that he didn't think that he could change the past, the present, or the future. So he's helpless to make changes, so he's just hoping to be serene and go through life.
Yeah, that's the only option he has in that passage.
There's nothing else. There is nothing besides the past, the present, and the future. So, like, he feels that the entirety of life is not something that he can do anything about. That's how I interpreted that anyway. All right, so Billy leaves the luncheon and heads home for prescribed nap time.
Yeah, and we talked about why he has to take the nap, right?
No.
It's because he was crying. We talked about him crying, and
right.
His doctor said, well, take a nap every day. And so he does.
Right.
Although this time he can't take a nap.
Well, but the stuff about him being really, really rich is before he gets out of bed.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about him being rich.
Rich as Croesus.
He makes, what, $60,000 a year, I think it said?
Yeah.
I'm thinking 60,000. That's pretty cool.
Hold on, let's do it. Let's do it. I need to know.
You need to know what it would really be?
In today's money.
All right, my WAG is $250.
That's your guess?
It's just off. I mean, yeah.
I was thinking 300. 5 other optometrists working for him in the shopping plaza, and that netted over $60,000 a year. In addition, he owned a fifth of the new Holiday Inn out on Route 54 and half of 3 Tasty Freeze stands. That's like, think of a Monopoly board.
Exactly. That is a good analogy. But then he goes on to describe exactly what Tasty Freeze is. And, like, there's several points,
$444 a year.
Wow, not even close. I was off by, basically a doubling in my calculation. But I never left 2004. So anyway, but he brings up, like, he describes what Tasty Freeze is, and, like, again and again and again, he goes into these details that are, to me, are completely superfluous. They don't provide anything for the story.
I'm so glad you said that, because, all right, here is the second thing that I said I was going to talk about. So when the 2 scouts died in Germany,
sherbet?
The snow was the color of raspberry sherbet. That's not ice cream, right? It's in an ice cream shop, but it's not ice cream.
It's not a custard either.
Yeah, exactly. And then a Tasty Freeze is a frozen custard. And he says it gave all the pleasures that ice cream could give without the stiffness and bitter coldness of ice cream. That's 2 times he mentioned non-ice cream products. Yeah. I don't know what that means. I just wanted to point it out.
That's really cool. I don't know what it means either, but it's definitely there. Well, I mean, you caught the Snickers, or not the Snickers, the Three Musketeers thing too.
Yeah, the Three Musketeers.
Don't know. Don't know.
Yeah, maybe it will come up again.
I don't know what to say, Philip, as far as, like, the superfluous details go. Like, to me, it's these kinds of things add to, like, a kind of concreteness. That's what they do for me.
It's also the thing that's important to him, it seems.
Being my own devil's advocate, I think it's one of Kurt Vonnegut's strengths is that he can describe things that people can relate to. And even if it seems rather superfluous, people relate to it. I mean, I know what Tasty Freeze is. And the same thing with the guy knocking on the window of his car. I mean, that has happened to me, and I get it. You're like, turn green, turn green, turn green.
All right, so nap time, rich as Croesus. He's got all of this money, which he never expected in life. But he's in an empty house right now, and he's trying desperately to take a nap, but he cannot sleep. And that's when the doorbell begins to clang.
Right. He's using magic fingers to rock himself to sleep, but it's not working.
Yeah, I wonder if people know about that. Like, do young kids know about magic fingers being like a thing? Because I don't know. Like, they stopped putting them in hotels quite a long time ago now.
It's just a device to shake the bed. It's to rock you, hopefully to comfort or soothe you. But if you watch like an old comedy, maybe a movie or something, and they get in the bed where it's shaking, it usually like powers off everything, or maybe dismounts from the wall. It just seems like one of the most rickety things you'd ever want to get on.
It'll definitely shake too much in a comedy.
I remember doing it a few times in my life, and it was interesting. One was like a slight vibration, and it was just like absolutely not relaxing whatsoever. And the other one was clearly not therapeutic. It was like ka-chunk, 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 ka-chunk.
All right, so the doorbell is ringing, which is preventing him from taking a nap.
This is a scene, if we were going to say that Billy Pilgrim was avoiding a black man on the street, he is also avoiding another minority right here.
He's privy to what's going on, too, though. Like, he knows that this is a grift of a sort.
Sure.
He knows that they're selling. He refers to them as cripples. One guy's on crutches. I don't know what's going on with the other one. It sounded like maybe he had Tourette's. And they're going door to door, and they're selling magazine subscriptions, but he won't answer his door. He knows what's going on, and he knows that there's a guy in a brand new Buick Riviera down the street that's their boss, and those magazine subscriptions are never going to be sent out. They're just going to take the money and go. And the clanging of the bell, he refers to it as hellish, and that triggers him to travel in time.
Yeah, and now he's back in Luxembourg again, right?
He is. And I will point out that like he seems to be having a pretty bad time when he's back in the United States. But when he's back in the war, like everything's like beatific.
Yeah, when he gets back, it's like you said, that winter scene where he is actually crying, or he's got tears in his eyes. Here he was trying to cry, couldn't cry, trying to get to sleep because of the crying that he can't get moist for. And then here he is bouncing into Luxembourg, and now he's got tears in his eyes.
I think they're crossing the border at this point from Luxembourg into Germany, and he sees everybody around him, friend and foe alike, and some of the buildings. They all have St. Elmo's fire on them.
What
that movie?
does that mean?
That's a 1980s movie?
It's a TV show. You didn't look it up?
No, I know what St. Elmo's fire is, but what did you read into this? I did.
Well, I read it as one of his symptoms, right? Personally, that's how I'm reading it. But he's seeing that glow that's like haloing people. I think he's having a religious experience, man. Did you look up St. Elmo?
Yeah.
Erasmus of Formia? I don't know how he became the patron saint of sailors and stomach pain.
Well, and it's like you said, this is yet another religious reference.
It is.
For a guy that is not religious at all, right?
Yeah, he went to church, but I don't think he's just like, he's not really that into the bombing of Vietnam. I don't think he was really that into religion.
Right. It was just one of those things that, again, I tell you, man,
he's coasting.
Yeah. Well, that too, yeah, definitely.
So Billy Pilgrim and Roland Weary become part of what he describes as a river of American humiliation flowing eastward. And this is the scene that we discussed briefly in the beginning when Weary gets spit upon by a German soldier who's like sitting on top of a tank and being driven westward back to the front.
And dude's drunk as a skunk, too.
Okay, so they're entering Germany, and there's a film crew that doesn't have any film.
This is another funny moment where we have yet another film crew not doing their job properly, I guess.
No, I think that they were sent there to film the captured soldiers coming in, and I don't know how much film it takes, but if you've got like 10,000 soldiers, that's going to be like more than an hour,
Why are they still doing it though?
I think they're just sitting there. I don't think they're doing it.
No, they zoomed in on Billy Pilgrim's face, and then they zoomed back out, and they're still there at the camera as though it were running.
I took that to mean that they just like looked at him. They weren't actually filming anything.
Well, they can't. They don't have any film.
That's what I'm getting at. They were just sitting there leaning on their tripods. Leaning.
He pulled focus to get onto Billy's face.
Did he?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Hey man, time to lean, you know what I mean? You don't want to get in trouble for anything.
Exactly. If I understand you correctly, I think maybe, they're just shirking. They don't want to go back.
There was a tiny plume of smoke at infinity. There was a battle there. People were dying there. So it goes.
Yeah, so it goes. That makes sense. Okay. So they're led into a rail yard, this river of POWs, essentially. They've all been put into rail cars in this huge rail yard in preparation for distribution into and throughout Germany. The prisons are full. There's a shortage of food, and etc.
Yeah, there's so many people that they have to take turns sleeping, right?
Yeah, they can't all stand up or all lie down at the same time. That's just his car. The Colonel car had 7 people, and then 1 dropped dead, and it was pretty empty.
Well, there's less of them, of course, right?
There's only 6 colonels living.
Sounds awesome to be an officer.
It does, doesn't it? Except for the dead one, I guess. Or, you know what, it's just a bad time they're having at that time.
He had double pneumonia. He wasn't going to last long. He described the sound, Philip. There's a good example. As, what did he say? It was wet paper bags? Something like that?
Wet wax paper or something, yeah.
Yeah, that's disgusting. The hobo was my favorite, though, because he gets in the car and he's like, it's not that bad. It's not so bad.
I've been hungrier than this.
I've seen worse.
I've been in worse places.
This whole scene reminded me of my grandmother. One time she said, tough times never last, but tough people do. And I think about that throughout my entire life. And that's exactly what I thought about when I heard this hobo. I'm like, this is nothing. I have been through far worse than this. We'll be fine.
It kind of sounds like they're Hogan's Heroes when they're getting all this food and they're living in the slaughterhouse, you know, and stuff. But, you know, all the bad stuff to go along with it, obviously. But it's like, it's kind of funny, you know, and here's this hobo to, like, you know, alleviate the situation a bit.
Make a little bit light of it.
Meanwhile, though, also saying that back home where he comes from, it's been worse than actually the situation he's in right now.
Right.
I had the impression they were in this car for like a couple of days. That's not even moving.
2 days.
And they said they did give them food, but again, we're reminded of the humanity where Kurt Vonnegut said it very simply, not even elaborated on it. Said when food came in, the human beings were quiet and trusting and beautiful. They shared. I think that was actually kind of beautiful. That we hadn't evolved into survival of the fittest at that point.
All right, so the hobo, interesting, funny, kind of. They're packed in there tight like sardines in this particular case. They pass Christmas there and him spooning the hobo on Christmas.
Yeah, well, yeah, he falls asleep and he travels in time to 67 again, to the night he was kidnapped by a flying saucer from Tralfamadore.
Okay, so that ends the chapter.
Yeah, I was really enjoyed having this conversation with you guys. It was I like this chapter a lot.
I did too. It was nice. It was fun. I read it twice with no real issues, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I enjoyed the stuff that I was looking up too. It's like I get this context that I wasn't otherwise going to get. Like in a fantasy novel, for example, you can't really look a lot of stuff up because it's not referencing our reality. But in this case, this guy's using, you know, Vonnegut is referring to stuff that really exists. You know, Croesus was a real person who was extraordinarily wealthy. You know, so when he says he was rich as Croesus, like that's probably an idiom from his time period, but it means something.
Well, not just that, but things like bulletproof Bibles and, you know, the place in upstate New York. I think that's interesting. And the same thing with not Jeff Warren, but what was the guy's name?
Earl
Warren. Thank you very much. It lends a element of realism that I find very appealing.
Yeah, and then the Tralfamadore.
And then yes, exactly. And then you have this alien illusion, as far as Well,
so far, all we've had is
his word.
him saying that he has seen them, talked to them, and has been abducted by them, and then put into a zoo and mated with some lady.
Forced to mate with human models.
And we know all that because he wrote about it in the paper and got on a talk show late at night.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder if Art Bell was doing his radio show when Vonnegut was writing this book back then.
Yeah. I don't know, but I wonder if that's actually a true story. I wonder if Vonnegut actually did
get on a radio show.
Yeah, randomly and call in and just like make up a whole bunch of stuff. It sounds very plausible.
I don't know. What do you guys think about the fact that it seems like he has a better time during the war than he does at home?
It definitely feels that way.
Do you remember the description when they were marching into Germany, and he said that he was excited about it because he was seeing all these beautiful things, and dragon's teeth was one of them. I don't know what that is. I assume it's an implement of war. But then there was that beautiful house that had been shot up with bullets, and there was the guy with the unpainted whore. But he was just like wide-eyed watching him, watching around him. He's having all these religious experiences, essentially. He's seeing St. Elmo's fire on everybody. And then he goes back home, and it's like banal and boring and dull, and he's just not into it.
Could it just be something as simple as... this is his youthful days, and even like horrible moments are more satisfying than your tired old days?
I don't know.
I mean, is it just the malaise of everyday life?
I don't see how it could be. I mean, if he's actually spastic in time, that means that even as an old man, he knows he's spastic in time, so that would be exciting.
Maybe it's stopped.
Maybe.
I don't know. Where is he jumping from? Is he jumping from the day, the present day to the future? Or from the present day to the past? When did it start? It started in when did it start?
1944. The first time was when he was leaning against that tree before he got beat up.
That's right. And then it came to being beat up. So the first time he jumped was in the war.
Okay, but this doesn't make any sense, because then it says... He fell asleep, and he traveled in time to 1967 to the night he was kidnapped by a flying saucer from Trafalgar.
The time slips have nothing to do with the Tralfamadorians.
Okay.
That was in the last chapter. Or chapter
No,
I think it was last chapter.
That was the very last sentence of this chapter.
Yes, but it was in last chapter that he said those two things weren't related.
Well, I don't know.
I can't wait to read chapter 4.
Yep, chapter 4, and then chapter 5 is really long. So
I saw that.
Hey, 18, do you remember when I was telling you how I got bit by the snake and I haven't felt so alive as I have in a long time?
Uh-huh.
I think there may be a correlation of the human psyche there. So in World War II, when you're getting shot at and death is there, I mean, you're alive, you're aware of every moment. And then, like, I can relate to this part. It seems like the last 10 years of my life have been like a blur of non-consequence.
Right.
And then I get bit by a snake, and then I'm like, oh, wow, finally something exciting happens.
Live it up, baby. The next day might just be,
I'm just psychoanalyzing myself, which...
Nah, yeah.
And I was telling Etienne, I mean, it's like, I honestly feel like the last 10 years of my life have accomplished nothing.
But that's not true.
I know
it's all the other things.
I know.
It does seem true.
To wrap it around, I think that's what Kurt Vonnegut is thinking, is that, he had a meaningful life because every minute counted when you were in Europe during World War II. But since you came back, everything seems mundane and unimportant. And
his daughter's a bitchy flibberty gibbet.
Gibbet.
Yeah,
but do you remember how he got real excited when he went on the radio show? And he started writing those letters?
Yeah.
Like, he's excited about that stuff. He's just not excited about optometry and, like, the Lions Club. And he's going through the motions because that's what's expected of him. And he doesn't want to do those things.
But even when he's, like, trying to give us the wisdom of all this thing about the aliens and everything, God, what was I going to say? Never mind.
You weren't going to say that.
Well, I didn't. I knew I screwed up, so you don't want to use it anyway.
Corrective lenses. That's his purpose.
That's what it was. He still used his optometry to describe what he's trying to do, what wisdom he's trying to impart on us. I like that.
I think Vonnegut chose optometry very purposefully, right? Like that's there's no question that was done on purpose, but like I suspect that it's meaningful.
Well, it took him like 25 years to write this book, so and this was like his magnum opus, call it that.
Can we? I don't know.
You know what?
It's one of the ones he's judged on for sure.
Well, my point there is he has said from the beginning that this is the book he's wanted to write since he got out of World War II, and it took him.
That's what the narrator says.
Okay, that's that. Okay. Fine. You got me on that one, but I have the feeling that it took him.
That's probably true.
It took him 25 years to write this book, and that's because it was so important to him that he had to get it right, and he put insane amounts of thought into it.
What does the narrator say about this book?
Well, it was a failure. That's what he said.
You should never look back. You're just a salt.
Yeah, pillar of salt. All right, let's wind it down. We're going to get on to reading chapter 4. We'll see you guys again on the 9th of September. Keep reading, everyone.
Goodbye.